Hello, everybody. You're in the right place. We will wait a little bit for everybody to join and go through all the Zoom windows before you can actually get in. Yeah, I can see some people. Oh, goodness. Hello from Massachusetts. Um, if you want to populate in the chat where you're calling in from, we have got people from all over the show, and we'll take a minute or so to let people log in. I'll introduce myself and Niven in a bit, but I was looking at the title of this webinar, which is Toxic, Tolerable, or Just Not You. And I was having an imaginary picture of two people having a conversation about what they were going to do later today. I'm going to the toxic webinar. And so that was my little moment to chuckle to myself. Um, and think that that sounds like a fun thing to do at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
well, a little bit of masochism in my day. No,
Yeah.
or actually a little bit of illumination in my day.
Let's hope for that. All right. I'm
Yeah.
going to wait for another 30 seconds and um okay. Oh, hi, Chantal from Berlin. Um Even South Africans are not in South Africa at the moment, traveling all over the show. Hi, Nicola, Tyler. What you may recognize is that Niven and I are very differently dressed today. She is
Hmm.
in her coat, and I am in my sleeveless item because it is very warm where I am in Los Angeles, even though it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And it is very, very cold in South Africa right now.
Very.
Okay. I think it's time to start. As I say, I like to run a tight ship here. So let's get going. Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to have all of you here today. A quick intro. I'm Debbie Goodman. I'm CEO of Jackhammer Global. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a Pan-African executive search firm. We cover 24 countries on the continent. I've spent the last 25 years helping organizations to appoint leaders, board members, and I also work as a CEO coach, and I coach and advise leaders all over the world. And I really love my work. In fact, my mission with everything I do is to help companies and leaders to create amazing workplaces. But the truth is that in my line of work, I also hear way too many really awful work related stories from people who've just been impacted really badly, sometimes scarred by unhealthy work environments. And so every so often, I like to gather a gathering like this where we have the opportunity to talk about the issues that take place in bad work and in bad and unhealthy work environments. And who better to join me in this endeavor than the absolutely fabulous Niven Postma. I'm going to do a little intro, but for anybody who hasn't come across Niven before, she is the leading global expert in office politics. She's the author of the best-selling book, If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You. It's a must-read. If you haven't come across this book yet, you need to get it. And she spent decades in the trenches herself, publicly traded companies, nonprofits, government institutions. So this is not just theory for her. She's also an international speaker, a contributor to Harvard Business Review. She's been awarded the Archbishop Tutu Leadership Fellowship and almost has a PhD in organizational behavior. Navan, welcome back.
Ah, thank you, Debbie. It's always so lovely to be here.
Yeah, I was hoping I could call you doctor this time.
And call me anyway, Let's manifest my future.
All right, okay, we're gonna get there. All right, so some of you have heard Niven and me talk before. We've spoken about office politics. We've done a previous webinar on narcissism in the workplace. So Niven, why are we here again talking about this again? What's different this time?
I think because this question around toxicity specifically is one that really deserves some understanding, because I think you and I are certainly experiencing the same thing that, and I saw it in some of the LinkedIn posts talking about this webinar, that toxicity is becoming this catch-all phrase, this throwaway label, this kind of crutch for anything and everything. And in that, I think we're losing something important. And we're starting to blur the boundaries between high standards and toxicity, and they are distinctly different. So we need to understand that in some more detail.
Yeah, in our experience, there are essentially three very different situations that hide under that one word toxic. And those are number one, it actually is toxic. Okay.
Hmm.
There are
Yeah.
moments, there are situations where it's harmful and dangerous,
Yeah.
and you should know about those. Then it's number two, which is it's just bog standard organizational dysfunction, very frustrating, imperfect, messy, but sometimes tolerable. And then in the third category, it's not actually toxic. It's just the wrong fit, the wrong culture for you specifically. And so this session is about diagnosis. All right. We're going to help you get a much more accurate read on what's actually going on in your workplace right now, because we're going to talk through these three categories. Then we're going to give you some strategies for how to deal with whichever situation you're actually in. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So please do use the Q&A button, not the chat function, to post your questions. And I think you can also do that anonymously if you prefer. We'll be fielding those towards the end. I know a lot of people drop off at the end, but when the Q&A arises, but I must say in this one, you can learn a lot from what's happening in other people's work dramas. So hang in there. Okay, disclaimer. All right, before we dig in, I need to start with a waiver of liability because we're going to talk about workplace issues and personality types and traits that definitely have mental health overlaps. And neither Niven nor I are clinicians. Okay. So we're not therapists. If you feel that you are suffering from some kind of workplace abuse that's impacting your mental or physical health, I really encourage you to seek out a professional. And that's not us. We're professionals in other domains, but not qualified clinicians in this regard. Okay, so we have a live poll that I'm going to try and launch. And what I would be we just want to know like who's in the room, meaning not your name. You just need to tick one of the boxes. So I'm going to launch this little poll, and the questions are where are you when it comes to your workplace? Something's genuinely wrong here. It's affecting my health or sense of self. It's frustrating and imperfect, but survivable. Or I can't put my finger on what's wrong. It just doesn't feel right. Or I'm good, actually. I'm just here out of curiosity or to help someone else. So that just will give us a sense of who we're talking to. The poll numbers are the poll numbers are coming in. I'll give it a minute. We actually I ran a different poll, a quiz actually on LinkedIn. And also in order to determine could people figure out for themselves were they in a truly toxic work environment, something that was just general dysfunction, or being able to identify that maybe it was just the wrong fit. And very sadly, about 50% of the people said that they felt that they were in a properly harmful work environment, which is very distressing. Okay, so it seems like we have a very balanced mix here. Some people, 23% are saying something's genuinely wrong. It's really affecting them. That's 23%. That's a lot. That's almost a quarter of the group. Frustrating and imperfect, but survivable. We've got a third, 32%. 15% have said, I don't know, something's wrong. Just can't figure it out. And then about 30% are just here out of curiosity. Well, that's great. Thank you for doing that. All right. Let's get going. That's a really useful snapshot.
Hmm.
So, Niven, you've sort of started to talk about the problem with the word toxic. From
Hmm.
where you sit in the organizational politics research, what are you seeing?
Yeah, all manner of things. And I think part of my concern and part of why we're doing this is I'm seeing two extremes around toxicity. The one is what we were just saying, that everything is toxic. A demanding manager, a high stakes environment, a high stress environment. Let's just throw out the word toxic and get everyone's sympathy and tutting of concern. The other extreme is people really are in a toxic environment and they are not seeing it. They're not giving themselves the permission to acknowledge what is going on and they see themselves as the problem. And so,
Right.
I mean, this is really top of mind because, in fact, it happened quite recently. My mother-in-law was staying and somebody had reached out to me on LinkedIn last year actually and said, look, I'm going through a terrible time at work. Can you please help me? So I said, sure. Took a year for her to reach out to me. If she finally did, we had a half-hour chat. And my mother-in-law was in the kitchen, which is next to my office, could hear me getting more and more loud. And finally, when the call finished, I went out. She said, gosh, what was that about? And I said, Doreen, this woman is the primary breadwinner at home. She has two children. One is 6, one is 4. She's a chartered accountant, so she's got highly marketable skills. In the South African context, where affirmative action is taken very seriously as a national policy and priority, she is Black and she's a woman, so she has all manner of extra leverage in terms of her skills. She has a colleague who has committed suicide 2 weeks ago. She has another colleague who has been booked off work with a complete nervous breakdown. She is on depression and anti-anxiety medications, and she still thinks that if she tries harder, she'll make it better, and that maybe it's not that bad. And I said I was getting angry because I was getting so worried. And I said to her, what happens when, God forbid, you are pushed to the edge of your coping? And God forbid you either have a complete breakdown or, even worse, unthinkable, you actually kill yourself. I said, there is something seriously wrong here, and you need to take care of yourself and you need to understand it. So I think these are the two things. Either everything's toxic or I am the problem. And somewhere in the middle, can we start to find a healthy, rational, pragmatic ground for how this is working and what it should mean and what it does mean?
Yeah, I mean, so I see this in the people that I interview who've exited very unhealthy workplaces, and most of
Mm.
them have been very successful throughout their careers. They have had one sort of role after the other where they were literally top of the pyramid.
Yeah,
And all of a sudden, they encounter an environment that is just so unfamiliar to them because they've really they've exposed themselves or been exposed to a narcissistic colleague or leader, and and this has completely eroded their confidence. It's been so manipulative that they
yeah,
have really started to believe that it was them and not seen it for what it was. And that's the problem, is that people
yeah,
don't see it until it's too late, until the health consequences are really damaging or they get emotionally scarred. And when I
yeah,
talk about physical and emotional health,
yeah.
people having panic attacks at work. We hear this more frequently, and these are telltale signs. We'll go into a little bit more detail on what the behaviors are and how to identify this, but let's talk about the patterns to actually look for, because
Mm.
narcissistic, and I have pronounced that correctly after
You
much
have. Well
practice
done.
over the last 24 hours. It can sound abstract until you actually
Mm,
name the behaviors. And I think that's critical in some kind of self-diagnosis and awareness, to be able to look
mm,
at certain behaviors and go, okay, that's what it is, and that's what it isn't. So
mm.
let's talk about some of the typical patterns and behaviors.
Yeah, so it's worth understanding the three behaviors that have been classified by psychologists as the dark triad, right? So it's narcissism, Machiavellism, and psychopathy. So, if we start with narcissism, we may as well carry on to the others at the same time. So, narcissism, Greek myth of Narcissus who fell in love with his own reflection. And that's essentially narcissism, right? A completely overinflated sense of your own importance, your own fabulousness, and an incredible need. And of course, it can come from many things, but an incredible need for being seen, for being affirmed, for being the center of attention. And let's be really clear, exactly like you said in the disclaimer, we are not psychiatrists who can make a clinical definition that you are a narcissist. That's not what we're talking about here. And we're not talking only about the them who are diagnosed as narcissists. We all have this, okay? We all have narcissistic tendencies. We can all have behavior that is narcissistic. When it tips over into a pathology, okay, well, then it's a clinical diagnosis. But I mean, we can all recognize this in ourselves, even if we don't want to or like to. So that's narcissism, completely in love with yourself, for reasons of grandiosity or insecurity or anything in between. The second one is around Machiavellianism, named after Niccolo Machiavelli, an advisor to princes in medieval Italy. And it's about really, I mean, the best way to picture it is somebody rubbing their hands in glee, because they're moving the pieces and they're seeing things happen and they're playing people off against each other. The absolute odious character, Frank Underwood in House of Cards. I mean, he was a complete classic Machiavellian type character. And again,
Mm,
we all do that to a greater or lesser degree, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And then the last one is psychopathy, where essentially, I mean, what makes a psychopath? A psychopath is the absence of what I suppose most of us would think makes us human. In other words, a conscience,
mm.
empathy, remorse, guilt. Psychopaths don't have that, and psychopathic behavior is you see people purely as means to your ends, but they have no intrinsic value in and of themselves. So this is what we're talking about across those three. And like I say, they make up the dark triad.
Nevertheless, somebody who is filled with self-importance, that's fine if they just stick to their own self-importance. The problem is when the behaviors of this mix, and it's often a mix of
Yeah.
all of these three, that start to impact others. And I think that
Yes.
in terms of what that looks like, you will identify this with people who, aside from their delusions of grandeur and like really taking credit for everybody else's
Yes. Yes.
work,
Yes.
they're over their self-inflation, but they
Yes.
also take no accountability. They
Mm. Mm.
blame others for everything. They also have a tendency to play the victim.
Mm. Mm.
And so so what narcissists often, how I usually identify them is because they take absolutely no responsibility, no accountability for
Yeah.
anything bad that's going on, and take
Mm.
all of the credit for everything positive. But they're also extremely manipulative. So you
Mm.
would, as an example, something would arise where you really know to yourself that this was not okay, and you know
Yeah.
that you want to address this with the person, and it's you know that this is probably a high conflict personality because most narcissists are, and so you prepare really well. And you're starting to mount your case and you gather all the evidence and you're like, okay, this was not okay. I'm going to go and talk about
Yeah.
this. You go
Yeah.
and have the meeting, and somehow or another, the level of skillful manipulation in that meeting will
Yes.
mean that the tables get completely turned around, and
Yes.
all of a sudden
Yes.
you find yourself apologizing.
Like what the actual? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that
Yeah.
is a very typical scenario that would arise where you start to question yourself and go, hold on a second, okay, maybe they have got a point. Maybe it was me.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is where the
Yeah.
erosion of self-confidence happens. I have to attach to this a very specific behavior that I only became aware of. I'm like a bit ashamed, embarrassed that took me so long to understand what gaslighting is, because
Yeah.
I'm the victim of gaslighting. And it really deserves its own moment as a very typical behavior. Do you want to talk us through
Yes.
gaslighting?
Yeah. But I mean, before I do, what you've said here is straight out of a playbook, right?
Mm,
And there's a name for it, an acronym, DARVO. Have you ever heard of that?
no.
DARVO.
Hmm.
D, deny. No, that's not what happened. And deny your right to have a problem with it. Attack. And then the RVO is reverse victim and offender. So you go in there feeling really that you've got a solid case for that this is not okay. And then suddenly things get turned and you become the aggressor. And if you have a shred of conscience and empathy, well, then you're busy apologizing. It's straight
Mm,
out of a playbook, Debbie.
yeah.
I don't know where people get this or if it's just in the genes, but that's normal behavior.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Well,
gaslighting is
normal
very
behavior for a
well,
narcissist.
right. Okay, and gaslighting is something that you will encounter when you'll address an issue, and then your counterpart will say, no, 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 I didn't say that. No, 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 you
Yeah,
got it
yeah.
wrong. Uh-uh.
That's not what
No,
happened. And
that's
so
not what
it's
happened.
basically,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, actually, now that you mentioned that, I should probably look up the origin. I'd love to know the etymology of this because that would be interesting. But it's essentially denying reality, like
mm,
objective reality. I mean, I remember working for somebody once at one point, and I thought, I mean, he actually, the minutes said the conversation, the recording just said that this is what he said. No, I didn't say that.
Mm,
And it's one thing if it's faulty memories and recollections vary. God
yeah.
bless the Queen. But there's evidence that you said that. No, I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's unfathomable to people, to many of us, but it happens.
Right. But it is the key eroder of confidence because it causes
Sure.
such self-doubt.
Yes.
I remember being exposed to this and eventually going, hold on a second, am I going mad here? I'm
Yes,
sure
exactly.
I said this.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then just I want to talk about bullying because that is
Oh,
either, passive aggressive or very overt in terms of
yeah.
undermining, um, putting one down in front of others, the constant
Yeah.
humiliation. Once again,
Yeah.
another that can be hugely harmful. To be having that pit of dread in your gut, where you just dread going into a meeting because you anticipate what's going to happen. The panic attacks that I hear happening to
Mm,
people, guys.
mm,
These
mm.
are the behaviors of a genuinely harmful behavior, and we'll talk about what to do about it. But that's category one, the
Yes.
super, super
Fear,
dangerous type.
diminishment, demeaning,
Mhm.
starting to doubt your sanity. This
Yeah.
is a critical clue.
Okay. Let's talk about category two, which is, I hate to say the word normal dysfunction
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
that sounds wrong.
Yeah,
But it's the bog standard kind of way that that's where a lot of organizations
yeah,
reside a lot of the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And bad meetings, too many meetings, unclear decisions, political maneuvering, imperfect leaders doing imperfect jobs because they're human. Um, and this is so commonplace. How do you see this showing up in the workplaces where you're facilitating? Because I imagine you get called in a lot to help figure things out.
yeah. And of course, I've led organizations and I've been in organizations. So, look, I mean, there's something that I say in my book and I say often in my classes. The question is not whether organizations will have politics. The question is what politics they will have. And I think it's the same around imperfections and dysfunctions. The question is not whether organizations will be dysfunctional. The question is the degree to which they're dysfunctional and the kinds of dysfunctions they have and whether they're ones you can live with. And I always love reverting back to Patrick Lencioni's book about the five dysfunctions of a team. And I am not, let's be really clear, I am not just saying, well, roll over and play dead. No,
Hmm.
this is always a work in progress. We can always strive to do better. We should strive to do better when we have people's lives and careers in our hand. And we're fallible human beings, like you said. So his model on the dysfunctions, I think, is fantastic, and it resonates with teams all around the world. Anybody who's read
Mm.
it will understand why. And basically, he talks about the five dysfunctions in basically a triangle that builds from the
Yeah.
bottom up. And the first one is a lack of trust. You don't actually trust the people that you work with. And I've read a lot about trust, but none of the definitions resonate for me as much as the one that I have come up with, where I say that trust is about four things. When you trust somebody, you trust their competence, so they know what they're doing or they can figure it out. You trust their character, so their basic integrity. You trust their caring. Do they give a damn about what is going on, about you, about the task, about whatever? And the last one is you trust their consistency. You're not dealing with a maniac the one day and somebody completely different the next day, because that's always going to leave you on the back foot. So a lack of trust, it's the most important, it's the
Mm.
most difficult to fix, but once you fix it, it's astonishing what it unlocks. The second one is a fear of conflict. And the amount of meetings, and I just smile and wave. And I put in my screensaver expression when I hear people say repeatedly, let's take that offline.
Hmm.
Let's take that offline. Yeah, yeah, listen to your laughing. Look, I mean, sometimes it is necessary, it's appropriate, it's perfectly acceptable. Let's take this offline. But if that's the default, well, then there's a fear of productive conflict. Conflict that comes from caring deeply enough to say what you think and to put your opinions on the table. And because you trust and are trusted, you know that it's not going to be held against you because you actually all want the same thing and you want the best thing out of what you're
Hmm.
doing. The third one is a lack of commitment, you know. So again, you might have had the conflict, but for me, it's what he talks about, or maybe he doesn't talk about it, maybe I talk about it, meeting silence and corridor violence. So everyone has
Ooh.
smiled and nodded in the meeting, and then you wonder
Hmm.
why nothing ever happens. Well, because you
Yeah.
actually didn't commit in the meeting. And so I always say, A real team, a functional team, is not one where everyone agrees. You can't all agree. You won't all agree. But it is where everyone commits. So does everyone commit to what we have decided as opposed to go out of the room and say, well, I didn't actually buy into it and it's going to fail. And oh, guess what? It did fail.
Hmm.
Then the fourth one is about a lack of accountability. Good grief. To actually hold people accountable in a caring way. It's astonishing how many otherwise very senior and accomplished people can't get that right. And then the last one is inattention to results. So for me, the classic example of that is that wonderful cartoon where two people are sitting in a boat and the one side of the boat is sinking and going down like this in the water. And the person on the other side of the boat is, well, I'm so glad my side of the boat doesn't have a hole in it.
Yeah, yeah,
We're in this
yeah.
together. So
Right.
this happens to greater or lesser degrees.
Yes.
Address it, acknowledge it, fix it as much as you can. It's never going to be fully perfect.
Okay, and so how do we diagnose this general dysfunction? I mean, you've said to me that it comes from the systems and the processes, the pressure everybody's under, versus the people who are bullies, who are narcissistic, who are um, causing the damage. So it's personal
Yeah,
versus structural. Is that,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I think that's part of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, the big distinction between this kind of environment and truly toxic is you can trust people enough.
Mm,
You can give them leeway and credit and grace to be fallible,
right.
and they are good enough. Whereas in toxic, you are so busy necessarily, wisely, watching your damn back and looking for the next attack, which may be very polite and very
Passive
even
aggressive.
toned. Yeah, yeah, nobody ever raises their voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you are watching your back all the time, and you need to be.
Mm,
Whereas here it's like, damn it, that was disappointing. That was less than. I was less than. But okay, can we come back
mm,
together again? Does it matter? Can we reconcile? Can we remind ourselves of what the point of all of this is and get back on the horse together?
right. Okay. Okay. Third category. We need to keep this moving, Niven. Poor
Nice.
values alignment. Okay. So this is the thing, this is the category I think people are worst at naming because it requires them to have a level of personal accountability and go,
Yeah.
actually, there's nothing really wrong with the organization. It's just a different style, it's a different way of working, and I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid here. And
Yeah.
I do see this quite a bit when people are blaming things around them, but it's a fit mismatch or something
Yeah.
changed in
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
organization. It used to be a leadership style like X, and now it's leadership style like Y, and it's just not suiting them.
Yeah.
How do you know if it's an issues fit?
Yeah. 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 So I mean, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking, yeah, probably the first reaction to toxicity is, oh my God, run like hell. The second one is like, meh. I mean, the second one is more like, huh? Like what's going on here and can I cope with it? And this one is more like, meh, they're fine. They're okay. But like I said in my LinkedIn post, that classic rejection line in when you're dating, it's not you, it's me. No, no. It's not you, it's just not me. That's
Right.
maybe the best way you can think about it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think for me, if it's a values clash, what I have found when I have twice had values clashes in my career was the first time, actually, it was more a surface clash. This was a much more sedate, low key, take things slowly kind of organization than I was used to.
Mm,
So it was a style thing that was different. But at a deep level, the values of what we cared about to do together and what this organization existed to do was so compelling and so strong that I happily made the choice to adjust my behavior to fit in better. Because to be effective in that context, I needed to tone down what is often a, okay, let's make things happen, take charge kind of attitude. So I didn't sacrifice something fundamental to who I was. I just adapted my behavior accordingly to be more effective.
mm.
In another case, no, this was fundamentally the way you saw the world and the way I saw the world. It was just totally functional for you, totally not functional for me. And go on your way, but I'm not going to be part of it because
Yeah.
this is not me.
Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time. I, in fact, have a one of my coaching clients who has come, who his background was in like hardcore investment banking at like one of the top investment banks in the US, which is the culture of that is everything that you see on the Wolf of Wall Street, everything that you can imagine in terms of just hardcore brutal. The deal is everything. We
Mm.
work until it's done. It's just a brutal environment, very competitive. Anyway, he left there and joined an organization that is in the social impact space,
Oh,
investing
wow.
in social impact investments with a completely different pace, a completely different style. Collaboration is valued.
Mm. Mm.
Consultation is
Mm.
important. We don't
Mm.
just go out on our own in order to get the deal
Mm.
done because that's been considered
Mm.
going rogue. And he was
Mm.
just
Mm.
completely blindsided by
Mm.
this different style and going, hold on a second, what is going on here?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that was such a stark example of where it was a values misalignment in terms of a work style, and he
Mm.
needed to figure out whether he could adapt because the
Yes,
organization was the way it was. There was nothing wrong
yes,
with it.
yes,
It was just different. And he was struggling to drink the Kool-Aid. And
yes.
so that was a self-reckoning of
Mm.
going, okay, I need to figure out whether I'm here for the long haul.
Yes,
Okay, so now that what everybody's here actually for, Niven, is to talk about what to do about it. All right. So we've
yeah.
described these three very different playbooks. So now we've alluded to what one should do in category one, or being the very harmful physically, emotionally. You'll know that it's happening to you if you're having these very if you're having panic attacks, if you're having dread, anxiety, and if you just feel that there is no way out. Um, so what should somebody be doing in this environment?
Find a way out.
Find a way out. Yeah. So
Find a way out. And
yeah.
it may take some time, right?
Yeah.
And get all the help while you take the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get out. And this is not just my experience and opinion from my own fortunately, one experience like this. I have read a lot about this. I have spoken to colleagues. I have a colleague who has a PhD in corporate bullying. There's no one who says that you can overcome this because it's like domestic abuse, right?
Yes.
It's going to escalate. It's going to get worse.
Yes.
And so what I had a woman actually a few months ago say, but Niven, you don't understand. I'm the primary breadwinner. Not this woman that I got upset with, another woman. I'm the primary breadwinner. I have to have this job. And I said to her what I always say is, no, I understand that you have to work because you're the primary breadwinner. Don't dispute that for a second. But what I am saying from my own experience, from every bit of research I've been able to get my hands on, and I have looked for disconfirming evidence to give better advice if there is better advice to give. I can't give better advice. All of the evidence says that at some point you will no longer be able to work or no longer be
Mm-hmm.
able to work at full capacity. And then you really are, then you're really stuffed, okay? Because you do need to work, you still need to work, but you cannot work anymore in this job and no other job will take you.
Yeah.
And so before it gets to that point, which might take a few months, it might take a few years, you might normalize it so that you don't see it coming. And then one day it will catch up with you. Before it gets to that point, get all the help that you can. And so I say to people now, if you need to get on medication as a coping mechanism, get on the medication to stop the anxiety, to be able to get out of bed in the morning. Get the help from a mentor, from a coach. Start looking around while you still have a sense of your own value.
Mm.
Because the longer this carries on, the more that is going to be eroded. And then you really are in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, having experienced some of this myself and seeing other people, I think that when oftentimes one is very reluctant to realize that exit is inevitable. It's just a matter of timing. One's resistant to that. One wants to work at it. Maybe you're in a really good job, really good paying job. The job market looks like really, hard, and so you want to stay. And exit is inevitable for your own health. I can't say that over and over again, but it's okay if you are not yet ready to do anything about it yet. but know that that is the path.
Mm.
Just a question. What about HR? Because I hear this a lot. People say, and HR must be in such an awkward position at times
Yes,
when the matter is addressed with them. It's
yes,
understandably the place that people go with their workplace grievances. And I often
yes.
hear people saying, well, I took it to HR and then they didn't do anything. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, I've got a sense of why, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm not a Buddhist, but I do like a lot of Buddhist teachings. And one of the things that the Buddha said is that the biggest cause of distress in life is expectations, and particularly mismatched expectations. Well, he said expectations, full stop. I'll say mismatched. And this is where I want to tread carefully because I have a lot of colleagues and friends in HR who I deeply respect, who I know care a lot about their work. And I think the mismatch here, maybe less so for HR people, more so for people in organizations, is we don't actually understand what HR's role is. So I think way too many people see HR as their personal agony aunt, as their professional career advisor, as their go into battle knight on a white horse. That's not HR's role. Now, I'm not saying, that maybe in a different parallel universe that should be HR's role. That's a separate conversation. What is HR's role? And HR's role is to protect the company. I had a colleague say to me the other day, yeah, HR is a control function, it's a compliance function. I thought, gosh, that's a really strong thing to say because, of course, HR will tell themselves and anybody else that they're an enabling function. We unlock the discretionary energy of people. Well, yes, in an ideal world, you do. But for the most part, actually, when push comes to shove, HR's role is to protect the company. And so when a person becomes so much of an issue that they threaten the company's reputation, longevity, standing, whatever it is, when they pose a risk to the company, and there's enough complaints about it, fine, then they'll act against that person. But until then, if you are the problem, they'll deal with you. And if you are complaining about someone who has more power than you do, or has more ability to control the narrative than you do, you will become the problem and they will start protecting
Right.
the company against you. Worst case scenario, somewhere, or maybe also equally bad case scenario, they just can't do anything. They won't do anything because I've had HR people say to me, we could see what was happening. We had all the data. The analytics were showing us the turnover, attrition, absenteeism rate in this person's department. We were hearing what was being said and we were powerless to stop it because they had too much. They had too much power. So,
Yeah.
I think on the one hand, give HR a break. On the other hand, manage your expectations. Understand that that's not their role. And even if they are compelled to want to have it be their role, they often have their hands tied as well for many reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to sort of exclamation point that. I think that it's not just about compliance, and I think that many HR leaders really do want to do something about it, and they are completely they're just absolutely unable to make that call, move the needle, actually do anything for various reasons, and so it's a real bind. And I think it's something that deserves more tools, actually, because it's something that happens very frequently in work environments, and I don't think all HR leaders are actually equipped to handle these outer edge issues and what to do about it. So maybe our next webinar will be on that. Okay, let's talk about what people should do in category two, the general dysfunction of most organizations, because it's not necessarily exit, right?
No,
It's develop coping strategies, figure out boundaries, choose your
contribute to
battles.
making it better. Contribute
Yes,
to making it better.
certainly.
So why are you there? To just be a passive passenger and observer of the culture, or to actively do what you can without needing to save the entire world to make it better? So yes,
Yeah,
in your own repertoire, by all means, choose your battles, find your alliances, find the parts that work more functionally than others. But for heaven's sake, do something where you
yeah.
can, within the scope of your role, within the scope of your authority, to build the islands of sanity and functionality that we need more of in organizations and in the world.
Yeah, I think if you've got agency to actually make a change, for example, just something simple. Like if you're in an environment where there are just too many damn meetings, it's an easy thing to speak up about and go,
Mm.
why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Why do we need to? And if you've got the opportunity to make a small impact in your work environment around something that just makes no sense to you whatsoever, go for it. And
Yes.
this is, I think, where coaching really helps a lot. Look, I think coaching can help a lot in all of these instances, but
Yes.
certainly in helping to figure out the workplace dynamics, because there's often politics and power structures. I mean, there's always there, but being able to identify those and then figure out how to maneuver in a healthy way within that, I think that is that's often where coaching really comes to the fore, because this is not really black and white.
Yes.
But nevertheless, there is an opportunity to influence if you pick your battles.
And
Okay.
Debbie, I would say
Yeah.
not just an opportunity, there's an obligation, especially
Okay.
if you're more senior. That is
Yes.
part of your job is to make things more functional. So to throw up your hands in horror and clutch your pearls that they're dysfunctional. Okay, if they're irredeemably dysfunctional, good luck. It's a hiding to
Hmm.
nowhere. But until it's at that point, that's part of your role is to make it better.
Yeah. Um, Good point. Let's talk about the it's not you, it's me. What do we do there? Because it feels like there's nothing to fix. All right. We've
Yeah.
identified that this is that the organization is the way they are. There's nothing specifically bad about it. It's just a style, it's an approach, it's a work culture. And for example, an organization where there's been a decision to return back to work 5 days a week, and now that is just the way we're going to do things. Either you're going to buy into that and be okay
Or
with
you're not.
it, or you're going to have to figure out an alternative solution. It's
Yes.
not toxic, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Or a new leader comes into the organization, and you've got a new boss in your team, and they all of a sudden decide, this kind of wishy-washy, we're not really looking at our KPIs, and now I actually would like to make sure that everybody is accountable for the things that they're supposed to be accountable for. We can have a slightly different way of reporting on what we're doing. That can often cause a lot of unhappiness in people who've been used to working in a different way that was a little more laissez-faire.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I've seen over and over where people will go, "Oh my God, my boss is so toxic." In fact, my daughter said that to me the other day. She's just got
About you.
not
Mom,
about
you're so
me.
toxic.
No, never. But she would, she's just got her first student job. And she was like moaning about the fact that now the new supervisor was, was needing her to be there on time, like 2 minutes before the start. And I was like, sweetie, like there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it was such an
Yes.
affront to her. Anyway, we've got a lot of coaching to do there. Um, all right. Um, okay, so um, we,
So, to your
yes,
question,
yeah,
what to
yes,
do?
yes.
Decide if this is a fundamental value. Like, if I compromise this value, I'm compromising something intrinsic and integral to who I am. And I actually am rationalizing away something that I couldn't and shouldn't. Or, you know what? It's just like, so that's a substance values clash. If it's a style value clash, okay, so I might not totally fit. But this is the point I always made. I always used to hire people based on culture fit. Do they fit the culture? I used to look for it. Do I fit the culture? Well, if I fit the culture, it's just more of the same. Actually, then the question becomes, can I contribute to this culture? Can I see enough of an overlap in a Venn diagram between their values and mine? I may not jump out of bed with excitement, but I'm not totally put off either. And can I find that overlap of what is possible, what I can contribute, what matters enough for me to find the energy to do something about it?
Okay, so I think that's where we've got a summary of all of that. Hopefully, there are some good pointers, but mostly the first step is diagnose, figure out what situation you're actually in, and then some pretty good guidelines in terms of what to do about it, and what you can live with for a little bit, and what's going to be
Mm.
a mid to long-term situation. We've got a little bit of time now to handle some Q&A, and I'm going to read one out from an anonymous attendee because I think this is a really interesting one. In our peer leadership group of 10 leaders, one leader tries to overpower everyone, pokes their nose into everyone's work, and everybody's just all the leaders and respective teams are not happy, but this has been escalated to their boss, and it looks like the boss, the top boss, is always siding with the overpowering leader. So why do you think that happens? Because everybody in it sounds like the broader group of people can see that there's something not right, and then you've got a very senior person, the top boss, siding with somebody who is clearly abusing their power, being either micromanaging or poking their nose into everyone's work. Why do you think this happens? Because this is certainly something that I encounter from time to time.
Yeah, it's bringing back some bad memories. This doesn't sound quite as serious as the situation I've faced. But this is where it's not a numbers game. It's not a numbers game. It doesn't matter how many people feel the way that you feel. If the person with power and the person who is causing the problem has access to that power, sees it in a particular way, you're going to have to do a whole bunch of different kinds of convincing. So in my situation, yeah, look, this was incredibly toxic, and I was it's the worst experience of my career, and I was so devastated, horrified, confused, overwhelmed that I ended up going to the CEO the first time and saying, "Look, I don't know what the hell's going on here. You brought this bloke in." So I reported him into him. He reported into her. I knew her well. She had brought me in, and I said, "I don't know what's going on here, but this is not okay." She was horrified, horrified. Anyway, something was going to happen about it. Nothing happened about it. I went a few months later saying, "Look, I'm really, really trying to cope here, but I have to tell you, I'm deeply concerned about what is going on. And I was brought in to protect you, to serve you, not in a servile way, but I respect you and I want to see you succeed. This bloke's a disaster." Less impressed and less jumping into action. And Debbie, the third time I went to her, I had become the problem.
Hmm.
I had become the problem. And she basically didn't speak to me for a good 3 or 4 months. I was completely out in the cold. And so this is what you've got to understand is that when people, in this case, toxic people can't control you, then they control the narrative about you. And when they've got access and airtime that gives them more opportunity to control that narrative, you are going to have to get to the back of the queue of that narrative, and yours actually becomes irrelevant. And it's the same thing here. So even if it's not toxic, there is clearly something around the narrative that this person is telling to a person who is believing the narrative
Hmm.
that you're kind of sticking up your finger and saying, but hold on, but hold on, but hold on. It's not balancing out because it's not, well,
Right.
he's saying something good and you're saying something bad, therefore they even. No, no. There's a whole bunch more strength and weight and momentum to how he's being positioned. And
Yeah.
frankly, you never know the kind of leverage that people have with other people.
Yeah.
What's going on behind the scenes? And I'm not talking about anything untoward necessarily. I'm just talking about history, shared agendas, shared priorities, whatever it is. And so you're going to have to try to understand a couple of things quite carefully. First of all, why do you think this person in the leadership group is doing this? Is it an exercise in abuse and power? I can get away with it because no one's going to stop me. Or is it coming from a level of insecurity and a space of absolute ignorance, a blind spot around their behavior? And I know when I dislike somebody deeply, there's no coming back. I don't like you. Uh, and to try to find what might be driving them. The times when I haven't done that, I really regret it. The times when I have actually tried to look beneath the behavior, to look often for the insecurity, I wish I'd done it more in my career. So
That's
to try to understand why they're doing it, to understand what that need is, because all behavior has a need. And instead of just pushing back at the behavior and getting frustrated, what's the need that's driving the behavior and how can I try to meet them? Because if I'm not going to get them out and I'm not going to control the narrative, I need to try to make this more productive. We need to try to make this more productive. And it doesn't matter if 90% of the people agree. The 1% has access to the CEO and it's not going to
yeah.
make a difference.
Yeah, so you can imagine the conversation behind the scenes is this person is saying to the boss is, these people, they're just like not performing.
No,
Or, oh my
no.
God, this department is so weak. Or I really think I
You
need
brought me in
to,
just in time.
right? Feels like we all need degrees in behavioral science or something before we
Oh,
get our
yeah.
first job. Yeah, industrial psychology for all of us. There's another interesting one. I'm just watching the time, but so. I think we possibly didn't cover enough what people need to do when there's an awareness that the environment is actually toxic and how to, the question is, are there signifiers for a need to watch their back in a toxic scenario? And one of the things, and just to respond to that, I think if you start to think that you are in an environment that is toxic, truly
Mm,
toxic, or being
mm.
exposed to narcissistic people, and the identifier being a sort of a gaslighting behavior, one of the very practical things that you can do is you really need to document and write things down. These days, it's a little easier. You can, do recordings of meetings. It's easier to sort of have note takers so that things are not misunderstood. But that is a really important practical tool that you need to do so that you've got a reference point when somebody starts to
Yeah.
say, no, I didn't say that. No, you misunderstood. How could you have thought that? You completely got it wrong. That you can go, oh, wait, hold on a second. I had taken a note about this on X date and I am not going mad.
Mm. Yeah, and Debbie, that will help with your own sense of holding on to your sanity. It's probably not going to help the situation because, of
No.
course, you didn't misunderstand, but that doesn't mean that your actions in taking notes aren't going to be misconstrued. And despite the notes, so there's that great saying, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And you could very easily, rationally, logically say, well, if I've got the recording, this is the fact. The facts become irrelevant when somebody is crafting their own narrative around you and over you and despite you. So, yes, it'll help you. But you will also, in my experience, and I've been there, I've done that. I'm not dismissing it. I just know that I spend so much time and energy documenting anything,
Yeah.
everything, hoping that if I had a paper trail, that would be enough. It's not enough. Okay. It's nowhere
Yeah.
near enough. And you're spending all your time and energy in dealing with that rather than actually trying to find a way to navigate through the situation.
Yeah. I've just seen
So
a comment from somebody saying it's so exhausting.
it is exhausting. It's exhausting and it probably doesn't help in the end. I mean, unless it totally blows up and then you've got a labor lawyer involved and all that kind of stuff. Well, then a paper trail is really helpful. But
Mhm.
that's when it really goes to the extreme. So sorry, what was the other part of the question? Because that just
What other
yeah, forgot how to write.
what are the other sort of
Oh yes, what
direct?
are the other danger signs?
Yes.
And what are the yeah. So look, I remember watching a documentary years ago about a bloke who specialized in domestic abuse and had done a whole bunch of research on it and the pattern of domestic abuse. And he said something really interesting in terms of women that he rescued from situations, uh, essentially hostage situations or kidnapping situations as a result of abuse. And he said every single one of those women, when he got women who were still alive, every single one of those women said to him, something didn't feel right. Something was a little bit off. But I rationalized it away and I told myself I'm being ridiculous. No, 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 shame. Poor guy's going through a hard time, or we're meeting in a public place, whatever it was. So every single one of those women thought something's off here. And he said, so this is the thing for him. Human beings are the only animals on the planet who sense danger and walk in anyway. I have never forgotten it. So I think
Mm.
we discount our crap antenna. We discount that gut feeling of something's not great here. And of course, we can also then go to the other extreme. So when people tell me that they're in one toxic environment after another, then I start to get concerned because that kind
Yeah,
of
me too.
pattern, this stuff is more common than it should be, but it's not normal. And if you are constantly finding toxic environments, I think you need to take a long, hard look at what's going on here. What is it that you're not learning? What is it that you're contributing? What's happening in all the blaming where you are not claiming? And I'm not saying claiming 50-50, no, but what are you not claiming about what's happening here? So, once is bad enough, two is horrific, but you need to start learning something here. Three, I think you really haven't learned something. So when you're sensing danger, of course, part of the risk then is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you're feeling something is off, you start to look for it becomes the truth, and then the truth becomes fulfilled. Of course, that's a possibility. But I know in my situation, something was telling me there's something off here. And I rationalized it away in a whole bunch of ways because I really wanted the job and I really cared about doing this. And nothing's perfect. No, nothing is perfect, but there's something very wrong here.
hmm I mean, in my instance, I've encountered quite a number of narcissistic clients. Fortunately, I can walk away from them. I'm not employed there, and it's an easier
Yeah,
departure. But they're
yeah.
very good at also making you feel initially like you are amazing, like you are the one. And you think to yourself, I've heard these stories about this person, but they're just not
Yeah,
true. And I'm better than
yeah,
everybody else, and I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah,
be able
yeah,
to
yeah.
survive this because actually. I'm special. And
Yes.
my ego in those instances has gotten away with myself. And man, I walked into poison chalice over and over. We could be telling
That's a
war
very
stories.
powerful, very vulnerable, very accurate thing to say. I think that's,
Mm,
thank you, Debbie.
yeah, we could be telling war stories for long, but as I say, this is a tight ship that I like to run before everybody goes. Okay, there are a couple of things. We are going to send a recording of this to everybody who registered, and so you will be able to access this if you missed bits and pieces. I do also want to mention a few books that would be very good. There is Snakes in Suits, which is the seminal work on psychopaths.
Mm.
There is Niven's book, If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You. And then somebody mentioned the book Gaslighting, so that's another really good one. Um, and then Niven actually does she's got a LinkedIn learning course for coaches on this
No,
topic.
The LinkedIn Learning course is not for coaches. The other course is for coaches.
Oh God, okay. Tell everybody what it is, please, because I'm going to screw this up.
No, so I have two LinkedIn Learning courses, which I'm very proud of, actually. And a lot of people have taken them and given me great feedback. So people can have a look at that. And then, yeah, I've just launched something, and we've got a pilot going with 8 fantastic coaches where it's about coaching the politics of work.
Okay.
So helping clients deal with the politics as a coach. And we've got this pilot, and based on the fabulous feedback and the fabulous experience we're all having, we want to start rolling it out. So if you want, as a coach, to get a lot more skilled around this, this is a program you can apply to.
Okay, amazing. And then very lastly, in honor of Women's Month in South Africa, Jack Hammer Global is offering a career navigation coaching session gratis. It's to be provided by me as the coach. And so in the email that everybody's going to get tomorrow or Monday, there will be a link to apply for that. It's going to be like a lucky draw. We're going to do a little, you know, pick the person who and there's no qualifying criteria that you need, but just as an offer and a gift to women, if you find yourself in a challenging career situation, I am very glad to offer some time and hopefully give you some coaching support through that. So there will be a way to apply for that. I think I have covered everything. My admin team, did I cover everything? Is there something else left? No. Can I just say goodbye to everybody because we've got one more minute? Everybody, this is time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for being here for this hour. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. We will do another one of these. As much as they are like not pleasant to talk about, they are so necessary. And so thank you for being here. And wishing you all the very best. And let's create amazing workplaces where we can. I'm still holding out for that as my utopian ideal of what's possible in the world.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, bye now.